Governments worldwide are recognizing the need for cleaner electric-powered vehicles to reduce the carbon footprint. But are these electric vehicles really contributing to reducing emissions?
The big EV lie. Why they won't save the planet and all about dirty electricity. For many years, we have all heard the same lie. EVs will save the planet. Well, they won't, and this video will explain why. First off, sure, EVs don't pump out CO2 like their gas-guzzling cousins do, but here's the kicker. Most of the electricity that powers these electric rides comes from, you guessed it, good old fossil fuels. Unless you're living in spots like Norway, Iceland, or Brazil, where they're rocking renewable energy like it's going out of style, chances are your EV is running on fossil fuel juice. And let's face it, not every place has the natural goodies like rivers to dam up or a ton of sunshine to soak up. So unless the whole world suddenly goes green with their electricity, EVs aren't exactly walking the talk. And don't even get us started on making these things. Ever wonder where all those batteries come from? Well, they're like treasure chests filled with cobalt, nickel, and lithium, all of which need some serious mining to get. And guess what? There's only so much of this stuff to go around, and a good chunk of it comes from places with less than stellar human rights records. So yes, your shiny new electric whip might be rolling off the assembly line with the side of environmental guilt and a sprinkle of questionable labor practices. Now, let's talk numbers. Right now, EVs make up just a measly 9% of all the cars on the road. But if the powers that be have their way and shove EVs down our throats, we're gonna need a boatload more electricity to keep those wheels turning. And spoiler alert, we're already struggling to keep the lights on in some places. So where's all this extra power gonna come from? But hey, what if you're thinking, well, I'll just trade my old clunker for a shiny new EV? Not so fast. Constantly churning out new EVs might actually make things worse, not better. Imagine all those batteries ending up in the trash every few years. Sure, they're recyclable, but that's not exactly a walk in the park. And here's the kicker. Cars, whether they're electric or gas-powered, are just a tiny piece of the puzzle when it comes to fighting climate change. There are bigger fish to fry, like tackling emissions and greenhouse gases from industries. When we talk about greenhouse gases, or GHGs, we're diving into a pretty hefty topic. These sneaky gases trap heat in the Earth's atmosphere, causing all sorts of climate chaos. Let's break down the big players and how they're causing more damage than your average petrol vehicle. So, first off, we're talking gigatons here. Think billions of metric tons of greenhouse gases spewed into the atmosphere each year. Before COVID-19 crashed the party, we were pumping out a whopping 51 gigatons annually. Yeah, it's a whole lot of carbon floating around. So where's all this pollution coming from? Well, surprise, surprise, it's not just your everyday exhaust that's to blame. Sure, transport, including cars, trucks, ships, and planes, chip in about 16.2% of the global GHG pie, but industries like agriculture, forestry, and power generation are the real heavy hitters, accounting for a whopping 43% of global emissions. Yeah, you heard that right. Almost half of our GHGs come from industries just doing their thing. Now, let's zoom in on the big players in this game. China takes the crown with a staggering 32.5% of global emissions, thanks in part to its gazillion coal-powered power stations. But here's the kicker. When you look at emissions per person, China's not exactly leading the pack. No, that honor goes to places like Qatar, where folks are cranking out a jaw-dropping 66.2 tons of emissions per person. But hey, before we point fingers, let's give China some credit where it's due. They're hustling hard to beef up their green energy game, investing in renewables like solar and wind faster than you could say climate crisis. With massive projects like the Three Gorges Dam and a serious push for nuclear power, China might just outgreen the rest of us sooner than we think. So while it's easy to blame cars for all of our climate woes, the truth is they're just a drop in the bucket compared to industries and countries pumping out gigatons of GHGs. If we're serious about saving the planet, we gotta tackle big issues head on, whether it's cleaning up industries or patting countries like China on the back for going green. Another reason why EVs are not exactly the solution to the environmental problem is where your electricity really comes from. This is the stuff that puts the power in EVs and exposes some serious hypocrisy along the way. Now, let's clear the air, pun intended, about EV owners who think they're living in a utopian paradise where energy flows freely and the planet is saved by their eco-friendly rides. Hate to burst your bubble, but here's the harsh reality. Most countries aren't exactly running on sunshine and rainbows when it comes to electricity. Nope. We're talking about a hefty dose of gas and coal powering those sockets. Take a look around the globe, and you'll see that only a handful of countries, that being Brazil, Canada, Scandinavia, and a few others, can claim to have even halfway decently green energy. For the rest of us, it's a different story. Gas and coal still rule the roost, churning out gigatons of greenhouse gases with every flick of the switch. And guess what? EVs charging up at home or at those fancy charging points, yeah, they're just slurping up the same fossil fuel mix as your run-of-the-mill appliances. And what about those wind and solar saviors? Sure, they sound great on paper, but here's the catch. They're about as dependable as a coin toss. When the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing, we're left in the dark, quite literally. Plus, let's not forget the environmental cost of carving up vast swaths of land for solar and wind farms, not to mention the toll on our feathered friends. So when it comes down to it, there are no clean hands in the energy game. We're stuck between a rock and a hard place, relying on fossil fuels while grappling with the consequences. And while EVs might seem like a shiny solution, they're just a drop in the bucket compared to bigger issues at hand. So while it is becoming clear that EVs are not the solution, one starts to ask, why were cars made the punching bag of the environmental world? For starters, cars are everywhere. You can't walk down the street without seeing a sea of them. So when someone starts wagging their finger at cars for wrecking the planet, it's easy for us to picture the damage. We're used to the idea of replacing cars too, so when someone whispers electric vehicles, it doesn't feel like a stretch. Then there's the money factor. Let's face it, cars cost a pretty penny. And with all those taxes piling up, governments are making money faster than you can say road trip. It's like they've got a blank check to hike up those taxes and slap on some new ones while they're at it. But here's the kicker. The real climate villains aren't sitting in our driveways. No, they're sitting in plain sight, far from our day-to-day lives. We're talking about industries churning out greenhouse gases like there's no tomorrow. And let's not forget our good old buddy, diesel. Remember when it was supposed to be the eco-warrior's dream? It turns out it's more like a nightmare for the environment and our health. We've been deceived, folks. So what's the deal with EVs? Are they the shiny saviors they're cracked up to be, or are we headed for another diesel disaster? That's a tough call. But one thing's for sure, we need to open our eyes to the true cost of going electric, whether it's running on fossil fuels or ending up as landfill fodder. Because let's face it, we don't want to be fooled twice. So what's the bottom line in all of this? How do we fix the mess we're in? Well, it starts with putting pressure on our leaders to stop playing games with climate change. We need them to focus on the real issues instead of slapping band-aids on the problem. We're talking about making big, bold changes to the way we live our lives. Did you know that the biggest cruise ship ever just hit the seas? That's not exactly helping Mother Nature catch her breath, is it? We need to call out this kind of climate hypocrisy and demand real action. And let's get one thing straight, cars aren't the enemy here. They've revolutionized our world for the better. It's time we gave them the credit they deserve, but that doesn't mean we should turn a blind eye to the problems they bring either. So what can we do? Here's a few ideas to get us started. First, let's stop blaming the car and van drivers. Most folks can't afford electric vehicles or don't have the means to charge them. Instead of pointing fingers, let's work together to find solutions. And speaking of electric vehicles, they're only as green as the electricity they run on. We need to ramp up clean energy production if we want EVs to make a real difference. Nuclear power might not be everyone's favorite topic, but hey, it's a key player in the fight against climate change. We need to invest in nuclear and hydrogen power to pave the way for a greener future. But here's the reality check. Zero emissions might be a pipe dream. We've got to accept that some global warming is inevitable. But that doesn't mean we throw in the towel. We can still make a huge dent in the problem. And let's stop protesting and start taking action. We got to roll up our sleeves and get to work. That means helping countries like India switch to cleaner energy and taking deforestation head on. Finally, let's focus our legislation where it really counts. Freight transport, cruise liners, and industry are the real culprits when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. It's time to hold them accountable. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to subscribe to the channel and watch our next video.